Good afternoon, everyone. This is Matt Hardy, filling in for Christos Xenophontos, who is not able to join us today. I'm here representing the TPM Pooled Fund, as Christos can't join us today. So to all of you joining us on the line, thank you for tuning in this afternoon and welcome. We are happy to see so many of you joining us today. We had about 360 people register for the webinar today. We're looking forward to the presentations and to your participation in the Q&A after the presentations. For more information on the TPM webinar series, please visit the TPM portal at tpm-portal.com and click on TPM webinar series under events in the main menu. So today is episode number 5 of a special 5-part TPM target setting webinar mini series. So the last of the first one that we're doing of these mini series. Links to the videos and the slides from today's webinar are available on the TPM portal. Again, tpm-portal.com. So if you want to look at the video again, if you want to download presentations for today, as well as previous presentations, please go to the TPM portal. If you have any questions for the presenters during today's webinar, as well as any suggestions for future TPM webinar topics, maybe even additional mini-series that you would want to see, please submit them using the webinar's Q&A feature on the control panel. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and we're looking forward to a great discussion today. So at this point, Christos will turn it over to me. So I am Matt Hardy. I'm the Program Director for Planning and Performance Management at AASHTO. The TPM Pooled Fund, who is sponsoring this mini-series, is sponsored by AASHTO in cooperation with FHWA. There's also a partnership with the state of Rhode Island, who is serving as the sponsor for the TPM Pooled Fund. And again, we're very pleased to sponsor this Transportation Performance Management webinar series. The purpose of the webinar series is to support the broader TPM community by sharing lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the transportation performance management community. We're happy to see another great turnout for our 5th and final episode of the Target Setting mini-series today. I think the first 4 went really, really well. We're able to get into some very sort of technical discussions and be able to answer questions and really sort of make connections among and between the TPM community. We've got an outstanding group of presenters today to talk about target setting for the PM3 CMAQ measure, so Performance Management 3, the 3rd set for the congestion mitigation air quality. We want to be an acronym-free zone sometimes. I think you're really going to enjoy today's webinar. I know I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully and I know that I will learn a lot. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Hyana Park of Spy Pond Partners, who is a great partner with us in the TPM Pooled Fund, to share our agenda for today's webinar. Hyana, all yours.
Thanks, Matt. So as Matt said, today we're going to focus on state target setting approaches for federal PM3 traffic congestion and emissions reductions measures. For the agenda today, Nelson Hoffman from the Federal Highway Administration's Transportation Performance Management Team and Karen Parrott from FHWA's Office of Natural Environment will provide an overview of and federal perspective on target setting for the PM3 CMAQ measures. And then we'll have Brian Hoft from the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, who will kick off our agency presentation with a presentation about the challenges their RTC has faced in setting congestion and emission reduction targets in the Las Vegas urbanized area. Next, we'll hear from Hapte Casa from the Georgia DOT, who will present GDOT's approach to target setting for traffic congestion and emissions reductions. And Keith Miller from the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, NJTPA, will wrap up our agency presentations today, and he'll talk about New York City's urbanized area PM3 congestion targets. All right, just a reminder, please submit your comments and questions using the Q&A feature on the webinar control bar panel at any time during today's presentations. And as always, we'll make the slides and video available after today's webinar at tpm-portal.com. You can also download a PDF of the presentation now over in the handouts part of on the control panel. All right, so let's get started with FHWA's welcome and introduction of traffic congestion and emissions reductions target setting by Nelson Hoffman and Karen Parrott. First step is Nelson Hoffman, who is the FHWA TPM program manager responsible for policy and guidance. And then and he'll be followed by Karen Parrott, who is an air quality specialist with the FHWA Office of Natural Environment. She manages the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program and is the lead program staff for CMAQ performance measures for the office. Please join me in welcoming Nelson and Karen. Nelson, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Hanya. Good afternoon, and I think good morning to some folks out there. I'm going to be taking us through to look at a few of the Federal Highways resources, and we'll talk about some upcoming events. Just want to make sure everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
We're looking at, okay, great, thank you. Okay. So I've had actually some technical problems. That's why now you're not going to see me on camera. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction for today, in some ways to set the stage about resources, because I know there's a lot of us here. Our expert level on this topic is varied. So before we get into some very good presentations, I wanted to share with folks some available Federal Highways resources, and then talk about some upcoming events. And then, as Hanya said, the next speaker will be Karen Parrott, who is an air quality specialist for the Federal Highways Office of Natural Environment, who's going to discuss more details of the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program and the related performance measures. So, as many probably know, but I'm going to share it again because it's really important. I know we're talking about target setting, but there's also the target reporting. And coming up just around the corner is the submittal of the State Biennial Performance Report. This is the mid-performance period progress report, which is due October the 1st. And that is submitted through the performance management form, the electronic portal that Federal Highways manages, and state DOTs get specific points of access to provide that information. So the PMF, the performance management form, opens up September the 1st for that submittal that is due October the 1st. Then there is some review of Federal Highways state division offices for review and potential as needed, some resubmittals from state DOTs. And the PMF is going to be closed, locked on November the 2nd, and the data will be archived. So I wanted to share with folks, if you haven't already seen it, here on our website, the guidance page under reporting, is this document that includes all of the information that is going to be in the PMF. So if you're interested in what is being asked, or you're one of the state points of contact, this is where you can look at that information that will be in the PMF. So we have been, we have been doing lots of outreach and webinars and some trainings, and so and a demo. So I wanted to share with you here under presentations and webinars. If you go there, there is a 4-part series on demos on using the performance management form. And then also here is a July 30th webinar about the PMF, and there was some guidance provided in that from Vicki Miller, a member of the TPM team. So So again, lots of information here. I really strongly encourage folks, not just in relation to today's topic, but in general, to visit the TPM FHWA website, and there's a wealth of information. So we actually are going to have some additional outreach next Monday, which is August the 31st. There's going to be a specific CMAQ on-road mobile source emissions measure PMS-related webinar, which is going to be from 2 to 3. And I think probably somewhere we can provide a link, but that's a sort of specific to the states, POCs that are responsible for the CMAQ areas. So, so speaking of CMAQ, in preparation for today, I just wanted to share with you more federal highways resources that we have. This is the CMAQ landing page for federal highways, and over on the left you'll see performance measures, and if we click on performance measures, it brings us to a wealth of information concerning the CMAQ performance related performance measures. And I just wanted to dial in on 2 sites. One would be the TPM
Hey, Nelson?
CMAQ.
Nelson,
Yeah?
can you your screen again?
Yep. Thank you. There we go. Thank you.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So I don't know when you lost me, but here we are at the CMAQ performance measures page, and I just want to show, identify 2 areas for folks to take a look at. One is the TPM CMAQ applicabilities table. This is the information on those state DOTs and NPOs that the performance measures apply to. I'm not going to go there. There's multiple tables, lots of information to review. And then also down here lower, there are there's the fact sheets and additional information that is specific to CMAQ. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Karen Parent, Federal Highways, an air quality specialist, Office of Natural Environment, to talk to us further about the CMAQ performance measures.
Hi, everyone. This is Karen Parrott. Thank you, Nelson. Before we get into our terrific presentations from folks who have been working so hard at implementing these measures, I wanted to back us up just a little bit and kind of sort of figure out how we got here. If anyone's really not familiar with the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement, or CMAQ program, this is a federal aid funding program. It was first established roughly in the early 90s and has been included in every transportation reauthorization bill since then. The program was established really to fund transportation projects and programs that help areas either meet or attain, as well as maintain national air quality standards. The performance measures that we're going to be talking about here today are a result of a requirement under MAP 21 to address the performance of the CMAQ program by looking at traffic congestion and mobile source emissions. Those provisions in MAP 21 also require certain MPOs to develop CMAQ performance plans. So I will touch on those plans a little bit as well. But in terms of sort of how we got here, and if you're listening here, how does this apply to you? So I want to emphasize today a little bit about the applicability that Nelson just pointed out, those specific applicability tables on our website. So for these CMAQ related measures that we're talking about today, do they apply everywhere? Do they apply to all state DOTs and all MPOs? And the answer is no. These CMAQ related measures only apply in certain states and for certain MPOs. So without going into tremendous detail about the entire process of determining who these measures are applicable to, it's important to know 2 points really. At the heart of determining applicability for these measures is knowing those areas that do not meet or previously have not met those national ambient air quality standards for applicable pollutants. Those locations are determined by the US EPA. And the second point, probably more the good news, Federal Highways produces a document that outlines specifically which states and MPOs are subject to which measures. That includes the requirement which MPOs need to develop a CMAQ performance plan. So those are the applicability tables or the applicability document that Nelson pointed out on our website. So just to give you kind of an idea, for the first performance period that we are in right now, at the beginning of this performance period, 32 states and 44 MPOs were subject to the congestion measure requirements. 42 states and 119 MPOs were subject to the emissions measure requirements. And we had 46 MPOs who were subject to the requirement to prepare a CMAQ performance plan. Now, as we head into the mid-period reporting cycle for this first performance period, it is also important to know that the applicability can change at the mid-period. So 1 year before the mid-period reports are due, roughly a year ago, as of October 1, 2019, Federal Highways looked again at those non-attainment and maintenance areas to see if any areas were no longer non-attainment or maintenance, and then readjusted the applicability for both the congestion and the emission measures. Areas are not added during that mid-period reassessment, but areas can be removed in part or in full from needing to meet the requirements for the rest of the performance period. So for example, during the assessment in 2019, it was determined that there were 3 states and 15 MPOs who no longer needed to do performance requirements for the emissions measure associated with the pollutant carbon monoxide. There was 1 state and 1 MPO who no longer needed to complete requirements for the emissions measure for PM 2.5. There was 1 MPO who was no longer subject to any CMAQ performance requirements for the remainder of the performance period. And there was 1 state who was no longer subject to the congestion measure requirements. There were no states who were completely removed from requirements associated with the emissions measure. So finally, in terms of applicability, there's a few points I would like to share about the next performance period that starts October 1, 2022. So 1 year before those baseline reports are due, Federal Highways will again look at the applicability factors. And there are 2 changes that you can expect. One, the 2015 ozone standard was not effective at the time of the applicability determination for this performance period, but will be included in the next determination. So that means there are roughly 50 new non-attainment areas that will be included in that next determination. Secondly, there is a change in the requirement for who is subject to the congestion measures. For the next performance period, the congestion measures apply to all urbanized areas with a population over 200,000, not 1 million that we have currently, that also contain NHS mileage and a non-attainment or maintenance area for one of the applicable pollutants. So Federal Highways will make that determination of applicability as of October 1, 2021 for those areas. Note, however, that there is no change in the threshold requirement for which MPOs must develop a CMAQ performance plan. Sometimes there's a little confusion there. So the requirement remains the same, that each MPO serving a transportation management area with a population over 1 million, that includes a non-attainment or maintenance area, will need to develop a CMAQ performance plan to support the implementation of the CMAQ measures. So overall, this is the first performance period, and it's been an important learning process for all of us as we move forward with implementing these performance measure requirements. It seems that the states and MPOs are really off to a great start with good coordination, good data collection, and implementing these requirements. Federal Highways has been working to try to provide good support and assistance with that implementation. I know now we're going to hear from some great speakers who are going to share their experiences with implementing these measures and some of the challenges and lessons learned that they have. So I look forward to hearing those presentations, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for setting the stage for the webinar, Nelson and Karen. This is really helpful. All right, for our first agency presentation this afternoon, we'll hear from Brian Hoft of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. Brian is the director of the Regional Transportation Commission, Southern Nevada's Traffic Management Center, also known as the Freeway and Arterial Systems of Transportation, FAST. FAST provides for the day-to-day operation of the freeway system and traffic signal coordination throughout Southern Nevada, and is the focal point for the region's emerging transportation technology and innovation. Under Brian's leadership, the organization has participated in a number of autonomous and connected vehicle deployments on public streets, along with predictive and artificial intelligence projects. Currently, Brian is leading CAV efforts with private sector partners, including Aptiv, Audi, TrafficWare, and Waycare. And now I'll turn it over to Brian.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm assuming you can, yes.
To your screen? We're not able to see it yet. There you go.
Okay, so there's just a little bit of a lag. So do you see a nice fancy pool there?
Yes.
That everybody wants to dive into? Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm gonna turn off my webcam in case it came up, and let's get started. We have a lot to cover, and we are doing a lot of exciting things here in Las Vegas. As was mentioned, we are definitely diving deeply into the technology side of things, but that certainly does have a role in everything that we have to do for the congestion mitigation, the air quality, everything that goes into the target setting. So I'm going to use a couple of slides to set the stage and connect us with what has been shared in these different webinars, but then I am going to get into some of the details of the data that we work with, and you'll see the reasoning behind why I make these statements. So I need to make sure I advance. There we go. Spacebar doesn't advance. So this goes back to one of the opening slides where we talked about accountability. And as Karen also mentioned, everything that's going on right now is being done in a coordinated manner. Data collection is being done in a coordinated manner, and that's important to do. Eventually we have to establish targets. The targets have to be reasonable, and we have to move forward from them. What I want to be able to do is understand that large aggregated number to make sure that what we do, especially say at a traffic management center, can make a difference and be accounted for. So here's a screen capture from the Nevada page that shows that the target for annual hours of excessive delay per capita, the target is 10.0. So my question is, how is this number built? And then the other big thing is, how does this relate to some of the tools and the procedures that we have to work with, especially as we move over toward air quality? So in most cases with MPOs and urbanized areas, you're going to have a corresponding travel demand model. That model is going to use a lot of factors such as assumed roadway capacities, assumed roadway speeds, and then it's going to have that speed volume curve that makes assumptions about the traffic flow, the speeds as demand increases. So here's kind of the standard curve that shows that when we have the volumes in the free flow realm, no big deal. But when you get to the right of that chart and you get into that unstable flow, that's where you have problems, and that's where the air quality issues and the congestion issues really spike up. But it's over in that right-hand side of the curve where so much of a difference can be made at traffic management centers. And as we're finding out in the last few years, so much of a difference can be made when we have access to and start to understand what the data is telling us. So what I would put out there as a recommendation is that when we're working with these standard tools, let's understand what the assumptions are for the speed and the volume relationships, things like that. But let's see if we can zero in on making those metrics better and better. So now what I'll do is I'll transition. Well, one more comment there is, of course, this all relates to air quality conformity. Here in Southern Nevada at the RTC, we work with the local standards, we work with the EPA. Our travel demand model will provide forecasts of volumes and speeds. That turns into the different emissions. We work with those on the targets. But again, I want to make sure that when we get to this point where we're interacting with the air quality side of things, that we're doing so with the best data possible. And is it even possible to drill into the data, disaggregate, say, that 10.0 target, and understand what tools, what techniques, what investments are providing the best bang for the buck? What can we do about reliability? What can we do about incident mitigation and management? What can we do about signalized arterials? If we can provide a nexus between those individual activities and what happens with that target and how that all feeds into air quality emissions, then I believe we're on our way to some really good things. So what I will do with the remaining slides is give examples of data, what we're doing with it, and how it relates to both the freeways and to the signalized arterials. We are starting to work with new and emerging software that brings in data from mobile sources and fixed sensors, data that helps us to manage incidents. You see a little bit of a screenshot here of an example from that. But let me also give us a good qualifier. So again, I work at a traffic management center, and I have to take care of what's happening now, what's happening this afternoon, what's happening on the freeways, what's happening with the traffic signals. We are unique in our coverage in Southern Nevada in that we are responsible for traffic signal coordination. We are responsible for freeway operations and management. Every example that I show with regards to different activities, which translates into data opportunities and analytics and target setting, is something that we deal with. Here at the Traffic Management Center, we would love to, and we do to some extent, consider things at the strategic level, but we are also a very tactically focused organization. We do have to take care of the here and now, but we are generating and using a lot of data to help us do that. Now we just want to get that data put into this bigger process of target setting. So one of the most recent deployments, it just happened earlier this spring, right when COVID was hitting, is that we, along with Nevada Department of Transportation, installed a very aggressive active traffic management center. And I liken these sometimes to the slot machines here, because if you get 3 arrows, a yellow X, a red X, and another arrow, maybe that's going to cash out for you nicely. But actually what this can do is cash out nicely for travelers, because now we have the speed harmonization in place. We have the incident management. We have everything that's happening to help us harmonize that flow, mitigate situations, potentially prevent crashes and accidents, definitely prevent secondary crashes. And so that's what we're striving for with these types of deployments. Just another slide, another example of what's going on. Here's another example of some of the slides and how we harmonize. So what a driver would typically see is they would see reduced speed warning ahead. They would see what the new speed limits are. They would see if lanes are blocked or caution for the lanes. And then when the green arrows show up at the end, they would see that the speed event there has been discontinued and they can resume normal posted speeds. 42 of these gantries were deployed, in addition to, you know, being a very visually in-your-face, stunning type of thing that you see on the freeways. It does generate a lot of data, and I'll show you an example of some calculations shortly on some of the things that we're doing. Now, this launched in late March. Our traffic volumes down here in Las Vegas were already very low because of everything going on. So we don't necessarily have an apples to apples comparison to some of the metrics from the same month and days from last year, but we are still starting to see some interesting findings, and we're seeing some, we're learning how to use the data, because again, if we can provide outputs that show volume, speeds, and translate that into emissions, then that helps with understanding the whole target setting. Another thing that we're doing is we're working collaboratively with NDOT, with our technology partners, and with the Highway Patrol to do things to prevent crashes. So something that we fired up a couple of years ago was to not only post messages on our freeway signs that there's traffic queuing ahead, we would couple that with an officer parking the vehicle where it's prominently seen, flashing their lights, and then because we're getting real-time vehicle from the probe sources, we can see how the travelers react to this. And when we did a pilot study, we saw that we definitely reduced crashes, we reduced speeds. 91% of the travelers were obeying the posted speeds. And because of the success of a pilot, we received a Road to Zero grant, and then we were able to deploy more of these sites. But again, we're getting into safe and efficient use of our roadway system, getting metrics that work, and then understanding those targets that we set to reduce the excessive delay and translate into air quality opportunities. So here's just a real jumble of some metrics. One other thing that we've started working with on our freeways is wrong way driver warnings. And so we saw, for example, at some of the locations in July of this year, that 3 private citizens did try to enter a freeway on the off-ramp, and they were alerted to the challenge, and those 3 people were didn't enter the freeway in the wrong direction. The blue lines show that they exited the roadway, they turned around, or they backed up. Now, there were some other events that were detected, such as construction vehicles, emergency vehicles, or law enforcement vehicles. Those didn't necessarily account. But again, what we're doing here is finding how these investments can prevent crashes and provide that safer and more efficient travel. That little table that's kind of floating to the lower right is comparing the number of crashes and comparing the incident recovery, the time to unblock the lanes, unblock the shoulders. And when you compare April through July of 2019 and 2020, you do see a significant decrease in crashes, a significant decrease in incident recovery time. The extent to what that's attributable to COVID and reduced volumes versus the new gantry system is still to be determined, but it is showing some positive results, regardless of what the cause is. So my other big section of information to share is data on the traffic signals. The Las Vegas area has a very prevalent grid system of arterials, diagonals, things like that, but we are definitely a traffic signal mecca. And then our division, the FAST division, is responsible for the coordination of about 1,500 signals. So to do our job better, we want as good of data as possible. So one thing we developed 5 years ago now is an app where you can collect the data from your trip as you travel through a signalized network, and then you can get the details of your trip or the details of what's happening at the signalized intersection. So an example of some data from that is to get some trajectories on one of our busier corridors. This is Eastern Avenue. What happens when you merge together about 2 months worth of data is you can start to see the prevailing patterns. You can see where we have stops, programmed or not stopped. If you're exiting the freeway and you get to that road, Serene Avenue, that is a long stop. But once you get your green light, we are typically running you through several signals before you have to make another stop. And then you can make calculations about the speed ratio, the delay, the different metrics. We can do some before and after analytics. Let's say that we did a signal timing change, or there was construction or something was going on. We can do some analytics to see what's going on there. So eventually the speeds, the volumes, the delays, everything from every signal, from every corridor, from every time and day, those get aggregated up into some of these targets. And again, we just want to understand what goes into the numbers that are created for that target setting. Another example is to work with the emerging technology, the roadside units, the DSRC, which is the dedicated short range communication, or the CV2X, which is the connected vehicle to everything. And so we're working with other local agencies, such as City of Las Vegas. We're working with Aptiv Hyundai, which runs a program in Las Vegas where when you hail a Lyft ride to go from one resort to another, you have the option to opt into a automated vehicle ride. And so we collaborate with them to get the DSRC set up. But there's a whole wealth of data that can come from those deployments. And we're starting to learn how we can benefit from having that information. We've deployed close to 150 roadside units throughout the Nevada area. We have a new deployment coming up for another 20 to 30 signals down by our new Allegiant Stadium, where the Las Vegas Raiders will start their season next month. And so we're rapidly expanding on these technologies. So another example would be construction. So I guess one of the themes here is that I'm not just focusing on the average day of travel. We have to understand averages, but we also have to understand that there are more often than not days where we don't have that average travel. There may be higher numbers of crashes. There may be construction. We've teamed up with a tech company called Nexar so that they can get the video images from the dash cams, and then they have trained their artificial intelligence to start to quantify work zones. And one of the biggest complaints that any agency will get is, you closed all the lanes, there's all these orange cones, I don't see anybody working, what's the deal here? So if we can get a better understanding on the quantification of these work zones, then we can address those problems, and that certainly goes into fewer delays and better overall quality of the system. And so on that last slide, you saw a map of a bunch of work zones, and then I went to the cameras real quickly, and lo and behold, look at all those orange cones. One of the things that I think all of us have found during these last few months is here's an opportunity to be very aggressive in closing the lanes so we can build new cool things. And that's exactly what's happening at the north end of the Las Vegas Strip. The city of Las Vegas is putting in this big archway, kind of their entry into their city. This is near the Stratosphere Tower, and it's definitely orange cone land for sure. Another example, we coordinate even with the private sector, the OEMs. In this case, we worked with our traffic signal software provider, FHWA, and then we worked with a engineering company, Traffic Tech Services, based out of Oregon. And we also worked with Volkswagen, which is the parent company of Audi, to provide traffic signal information directly into the dash of your vehicle. So you can see a couple of those shots below where it's telling you that you got 21 seconds until the left turn, or 10 seconds until the whatever's going on the right-hand side. Some new features that have been rolled out in the last year or so is even a green light, and then the travel speed that you need to maintain to make the next green light. So not only does this provide a fun and interesting piece of information to travelers, it generates a lot of data that we can use again to quantify the signal performance to achieve the goals and the target setting that we're getting. So one more main example, and then just my closing slide and some closing thoughts. We got to consider all modes of travel. So transit, we have other technology we've been looking at when it comes to pedestrian safety, and we're obviously worried about the peds, the bicyclists, any vulnerable road user out there. One of the things that we're doing a bit of here in Las Vegas is the transit signal priority. So we want to understand the nexus between extending green lights for buses based on schedule adherence and impacts that might have on the overall flow. How does that also mesh with the, say, the emergency vehicle preempts? There's a lot of things that are happening on the signalized arterials. And again, it's generating data, but this would be a nice opportunity to take data, not focus just on the private vehicles, but also now look at other modes of travel so that we can see what the impact is there. So basically, again, what we want to do is we are excited about the target setting. We are working with our partners to achieve those goals, and then, to establish those goals and then work together to achieve them. But we certainly can benefit from having these discrete and wide-ranging pieces of data so that we can again understand where do we get the best bang for the buck. And so that concludes my presentation, feel free to reach out to me in the future. And then this closing shot again is we got the new Allegiant Stadium and the Las Vegas Raiders starting up soon. And you can, that object in the middle of the stadium is actually the 85-foot tall Al Davis torch, and it will have a nice circular bar around it. And we're excited about this event, and it will certainly generate some new traffic challenges for us as well. So that concludes my comments, and I think someone takes over for me.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you so much, Brian. For our next presentation, I'd like to introduce Hapte Kassa from the Georgia Department of Transportation. Hapte is a Technical Services and Air Quality Branch Chief at GDOT's Division of Planning. He manages the development and maintenance of the Georgia statewide travel demand model, as well as 14 regional MPO models. He also manages the CMAQ program and oversees the transportation demand management program called Georgia Commute Options. He also managed the 2018 PM3 target setting and reporting, and is currently working on the mid-performance period requirements. On a national level, Hapte has served on national boards and survey committees, as well as on TRB committees and project panels. All right, take it away, Hapte.
Okay, thank you, for the introduction. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just put it on a presentation mode. Thank you for the introduction, Yuan, and good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I know it is afternoon here and it is morning for the other side of the country. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share Georgia DOT's experience on traffic congestion and emissions reduction target setting. First off, I just want to thank the Atlanta Regional Commission for their cooperation and experience and expertise while we were setting the target back in 2018, the first time that we were doing it, and then continued a great deal of coordination in the current effort as we work on the mid-performance period progress report and also revisit the target setting if there is any opportunity on that. The Atlanta Regional Commission and Georgia DOT has been working and continue to work hand in hand. I also want to acknowledge our consultants, modern mobility partners who really assigned dedicated staff members who are diligently and tirelessly working to assist the department on this effort. So, okay. So a little bit of background. I'm going to be discussing the background, the transportation performance management overview, and then specifically the PM3 GDOT approach. And at the end, I'll have a summary slide. This basically shows, yes.
You are in presenter mode. You may want to switch over to your slideshow mode. Yep, you were just on it.
Is it coming up?
There's a delay.
Okay.
And then we can also see your control panel. So if you want to slide that over to your other, I believe we're seeing either your screen 1 or screen 2. You may want to switch to your other screen.
How about now?
It is still in your presenter mode. So I think you're going to want to hit.
I think it's fine. We can see it, so let's just keep it.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that better now? Okay. Is that better now?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So this basically shows, what Georgia is, basically Georgia profile and some facts. Georgia is really a growing state. The last 25 or so years, I would say, the population has been doubled, especially after 1980s. We are aiding the nation in population. Currently, we have 10.16 million. And then we have upward of the 1,200 miles of interstates. As you can see in the Atlanta area, the interstates are crisscrossing. We have 159 counties and 15 MPOs in Georgia. We have the #1 busiest airport for many years in a row in the world, and also have the 4th busiest container port in the US. Georgia had 3 non-attainment MPOs in the past for 2 criteria pollutants, PM2.5 and ozone. But the air in Georgia has become cleaner, and as of right now, only 7 counties in the Atlanta area are non-attainment for ozone. So the state is no longer non-attainment for PM2.5. This is TPM, as you know, has 3 parts: PM1, PM2, and PM3. PM1 is safety, PM2 is bridge and pavement, and then PM3, what I'm going to be discussing, is system performance, freight, and CMAQ. Different offices in GDOT are responsible to both set the target and also report the progress towards those targets. Also planning, where I belong, is responsible for target setting and also the biennial report, as we are doing now. So I'm going to pause a little bit on this slide. So the national goals, this is the national goals, measures, target plans, reports, and accountability and transparency, a little bit as Brian was discussing. So you see what the purpose of the transportation performance management is, and you can see them bulleted here and mentioned in the slide. But I just want to point out the fundamental understanding and associated application from state and local level. Basically, FHWA defines transportation performance management as a strategic approach that uses system information to make investment and policy decisions to achieve national performance goals. And if you take that to the state and the local level, though, transportation performance management should be systematically applied on a regular basis. If followed through properly, this process, the TPM process, provides key information to guide decision makers understand the consequence of their investment, whether it's a local level or state level, decisions across all transportation assets and modes, whether it is a highway, transit, or otherwise. This is basically the schedule of the TPM. The orange one shows like October 1st is the deadline for mid-performance period progress report, and we are on target. This is also, the congestion mitigation and air quality portion, the performance measures, what they are, the geographic extent, and the applicable roadways and time frame for the targets. So, percent of non-single occupancy vehicles, that right now it's only the Atlanta urbanized area. I think in the beginning of this presentation, this session rather, it has been noted that a population over 1 million are required to report on that. And then total emissions reduction, even though the report is statewide, but currently, as I said in the beginning, only Atlanta area is non-attainment for ozone, and so the report gets into that. So basically, GDOT and Atlanta Regional Commission and Cartersville-Bartow Metropolitan Planning Organizations are required to establish and report a single target. So why we included Cartersville-Bartow? Because Bartow County is one of the 7 non-attainment areas in the Atlanta urbanized area. So that's why. So we're basically looking at right now 1 non-attainment area, but 2 different MPOs, because one of the counties within the Atlanta non-attainment area belongs to Cartersville-Bartow MPO. So this is another slide. Pretty much the process and the key elements that we followed through in step 1, we downloaded the 2018 and 2019 two-year condition performance. We calculated the actual two-year conditions of the TPM for 2018 and 19. And then the second is just the two-year progress, comparing the two-year conditions to the two-year targets for the 2018 and 19. That is the second step we did. And then we looked at different investment strategies. There will be a slide that talks about this, but investment strategies is what kind of investment the department made and how they kind of change the congestion, the emissions reduction, and all that. And then we discussed the target. We evaluated the target. As I was saying in the beginning, we got together with the Atlanta Regional Commission for the CMAQ target setting and everything else. And so we did some sensitivity testing, if applicable, and then we came up with a recommendation for the executive management. So this is the process that we followed. This is the annual hours of peak hour excessive delay, PHED per capita, the two-year condition performance. The desired trend is downward trend, but as you can see, we are basically meeting the target. So the GDOT and ARC, Atlanta Regional Commission, Carter-Silbarto, are required to establish and report a single target for annual hours of peak hour excessive delay. So we are working towards that because of the 1 million threshold that is put with the FHWA. This is again the annual hours of peak hour excessive delay per capita. As you can see, for 2016. So why we included 2016, I just have to mention really briefly, in order to set the target back in 2018, the only available data we had from NPMRDS was 2017. But the department purchased additional backfill data to make sure that the data is kind of similar in nature and in the format, INRIX data. So we purchased that, and then we had at least 2 data points to review in order to set the target. Obviously, we included a lot of different assumptions, external factors, internal factors, and all that, but basically we had 2016 data, then we had 2017, 18, and then 19. So as you can see, 2018, the peak hour excessive delay was 21.7, and then in 2019, it's dipped down 18.9. So it really meets the target. The desired trend is kind of downwards. It meets the target, but why is that dip from 21.7 in 2018 to 2019? I think that's going to be a discussion in the next slide. So, as I was saying in the beginning, TPM is really useful to get into your investment decisions. And what is the consequence or the benefit of those decisions, whether those investments really move the needle one way or the other. So here it's just the department had invested into what is called Major Mobility Investment Program. And so, you see the map in the left side, Atlanta and all of the interstates. There are express lanes, there are, corridor express lanes and express extensions and whatnot. So in the I-75 South Metro Express lanes was open to traffic in January 2017. It added 12 miles reversible toll lanes along the median of I-75 in from McDonough Road to Henry County in the Clayton County. The second thing is the Northwest Corridor Express lanes also open to traffic in September 2018, and it added 29.7 miles of express lanes along I-75 from Acres Mill Road to Hickory Grove Road, along I-575 from I-75 to 6th Road. It is in the northern part of the Atlanta. And then also the I-85 extension opened to traffic in November of 2018. It also added 10 miles of toll lanes north of the existing I-85 express lane from Old Peachtree Road to Hamilton Road. So this basically is how this investment was really moving the needle. So if you go back to the previous slide, and it shows you how it's dipped from 21 point something to 18.7. So this is basically what is how performance measures and the metrics are really valuable for investment decisions. Next is non-SOV measures, the 2-year condition, performance, and progress. Again, the desired trend is upward. So you can see we got the data from American Community Survey 2009-2013, 2012-2016, and 2014-2018. So these are basically the numbers or the population that resulted into the percentage of non-SOV. So again, the targets are, in all cases, we miss the target. So total emissions reductions, this is a 2-year condition performance. We utilize the project information from CMAQ public access database. A lot of you should be familiar with this. We downloaded the data. We got what is authorized for every single year. And then we basically use that data. And also, as I was saying in the beginning, we coordinated with the Atlanta Regional Commission to get their CMAQ funded projects. And then we also evaluated the deliverability of those projects, because the way it's reported in the public access database in the portal is that the year the projects were authorized. Projects are authorized, that does not necessarily equate to projects completed and open to traffic. So in order to get that number, we coordinated with the Atlanta Regional Commission again, and once we have a handle of the rate of deliverability, then we kind of went back and tried to see if we need to adjust the target. This is the total emissions reduction. It's also the 2-year progress from the left. I'm not going to read the numbers, but in both cases, the status is just it meets target, and that clearly shows the coordination and working together cooperatively with the Atlanta Regional Commission and the Georgia DOT along with our consultants. Again, total emissions reduction. This is this data was used into performance calculations. We used the ARC 5-year Transportation Improvement Program 2020-2025 project list, and then the type of projects, whatever type of projects they are. And then we use the ARC CMAQ calculation spreadsheet results. And then again, we use the air quality CMAQ public access system data through 2019. And then we post-process the data and then to see if there is even a need to adjust the target. We had a concurrence on the target setting methodology for 2020. We revisited the target setting back in 2018, and then 2 years later, then we revisited the target, and then we made a determination that we don't need to change our methodology to change our targets setting process. This is again kind of full circle back to the previous slide. Not the immediate previous, but in the beginning, I was talking about how the transportation performance management is really useful and instrumental for investment strategy and decisions. So it's kind of full circle. The towing and recovery initiative program, it's called TRIP, that kind of is extremely valuable to clear any kind of accidents in the freeway, and so that was significantly used. The I-85 diverging diamond interchange at Camp Creek Parkway was also included and evaluated. So there are a number of Cav Link. One of on the right side, there is a MARTA service, the MARTA service expansion, also funded by CMAQ. Gwinnett transit service enhancement, also Gwinnett County is just northeast of the city of Atlanta, and so they have a transit system that comes to the city of Atlanta and in circulation within Gwinnett County. So in Douglas County, also the fixed route public bus service was funded by CMAQ. So these are all how the TPM is kind of, related into investment decisions. CMAQ measures, mid performance and reevaluation, adjustment of the forward targets is really optional. We have GDOT or any other agency has an opportunity to adjust the targets if needed. But in our case, we're not recommending any change to the forward targets for all of the PM3 performance in the targets that we developed back in 2018. So this is my summary slide. Pretty much the first one, the annual hours of peak hour excessive delay per capita, the desired trend is downward, and it meets the target. And also the non-SOV measure percentage. Also the desired trend is upward. And then we also meeting the target, and we're not recommending any change to the target. The total emissions reduction, also same thing. I'm not going to read down the line, but you got the point, the desired trends, and also whether we meet the target or not. We are not from the technical staff, the Atlanta Regional Commission, GDOT staff here along with our consultants. We are not recommending to change the targets, but obviously this recommendation has to be reviewed by executive management and the final decision will be made. So that is all I have. If you have any questions, here is my contact information. Feel free to call me or send me an email. I'll be happy to answer it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Oh, all right. Thanks, Hapte. Before I introduce our final speaker, just a reminder that if you have a question, to put that into the questions part of the menu you have in GoToWebinar. All right, so wrapping up our agency presentations for today, we're pleased to have Keith Miller joining us from the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. Keith has worked at the NJTPA, which is the MPO for 13 counties in northern and central New Jersey since 2001. He manages the NJTPA's data analysis and forecasting efforts focused on providing accurate information to transportation decision makers within a performance-based planning process. Prior to joining the NJTPA, Keith worked for 13 years for an environmental consulting firm using GIS, databases, and water resources models to study a variety of environmental issues. Now I'll turn it over to Keith.
Thank you, Yana. I hope people can see my screen and hear me. Just want to double check. Okay. Thanks and good afternoon. I think it's afternoon for most people unless you're west of the West Coast, and maybe people are joining us from Hawaii. But today I'm going to focus my presentation on the CMAQ traffic congestion performance measures that are reported the urbanized area scale, and reporting on the experience with the urbanized area surrounding New York City. However, I have been involved in the emissions measure target setting here in New Jersey, so if there's any questions on that, I might be able to answer them. So I'll start with the obligatory slide about our region. You can see some of the stats here, but I'll add that New Jersey is rather unique that it's completely covered by 3 different MPOs. And also that New Jersey is the most densely populated state, and the NJTPA region is the most densely populated portion of the state. We have about 1,600 people per square mile here. However, the region also includes a lot of rural areas with farms, forests, and even a national seashore. But as I mentioned, my talk today focuses on the Newark urbanized area, which centers around New York City. For those that aren't aware, Manhattan is located right here, and this is the NJTPA region here. About a third of the urbanized areas, 19 million people, are located within the NJTPA region. This urbanized area has partners from New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, including 5 MPOs, all 3 state DOTs, and 2 FHWA divisions. You can see the logos on the screen here. And if anyone from this group is on the webinar, I want to thank you immensely for your participation in our discussions. Although technically only 3 of these MPOs, NJTPA, NMTC, the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, responsible for the area here, and DVRPC, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, centered around Philadelphia. Those 3 MPOs have NHS roads in the urbanized area. So only those MPOs, New Jersey DOT and New York State DOT, are responsible for setting targets for this urbanized area. The group of MPOs and DOTs and FHWA met monthly from July 2017 through May of 2018 to discuss the data and initial target settings for the CMAQ traffic congestion measures. We also recently met in April and May of this year to discuss the progress on the 2-year target and potentially modifying the 4-year targets. And as a spoiler alert, we chose not to modify the existing 4-year targets, but hopefully you continue to listen on into my presentation. So here's a brief recap of the required CMAQ traffic congestion measures, which I'll get into individually in a minute. And hopefully you're somewhat familiar with them by now. But just to reiterate, they are the percent of non-single occupant vehicle travel, non-SOV for short, and the annual hours of peak hour excessive delay, otherwise known as PHED. And the slide here shows some of the data sources and information about those measures. This slide lists some of the considerations that the coordination group took into account when setting the targets for the urbanized area. We wanted to make sure that the targets reflected the policy goals of the various agencies, which thankfully all aligned toward managing extreme congestion and decreasing single occupant vehicle use. In setting the targets, we looked at trends, not just in the national performance measures themselves where they were available, but also in other indicators that helped provide context for these measures, including growth in population, jobs, vehicle miles traveled, and transit use. And as with all target setting, it's important to accurately reflect constraints, especially with regards to funding resources and other priorities, but also realizing that the current projects that are in the pipeline will likely have limited impacts in the short-term horizon of the required 2- and 4-year targets. Finally, there were a slew of uncertainties to deal with. Probably most important was uncertainties about the data, which I'll touch on it a little bit later, but also uncertainties about what the future might bring in terms of travel choices. Of course, when we set the initial targets, there was no discussion of a global pandemic drastically altering how people travel. As I mentioned, it was important to keep in mind past trends in factors that might impact travel congestion and non-SOV travel. For example, while population, that's shown in the orange line on this chart, and jobs shown in purple have been growing, but at different rates, VMT appears to have leveled off in our urbanized area, and transit may have hit a temporary peak, or at least until major projects are completed that increase transit supply in the region. And transit has an important part in the non-SOV measure, as transit represents nearly 2/3 of the non-SOV travel share in this urbanized area. It's also important to point out that population is included in both of the CMAQ traffic congestion measures, and therefore it's important to keep any anticipated population growth in mind. For example, for the non-SOV measure, a constant percentage with increasing population means that more people are commuting via non-SOV modes like transit. So with a limited transit capacity, it might be a challenge just to maintain the current non-SOV mode share in the face of increasing population. So how much of the region commutes by means other than driving alone? In this urbanized area, more than half. And that's due to the, mostly due to the large transit supply in our urbanized area. And that's even been slightly increasing over time. So I'm showing in this graph, in the blue line, the data from non-SOV mode share from the Census 5-year ACS. Back in 2018, when we set the initial target, The most recent value was for the 5-year period ending in 2016, which showed that 51.6% of the urbanized area reported that they traveled to work by primarily non-SOV modes. At that time, the group agreed to a 2-year target that maintained that level of non-SOV percentage and a slight increase in the 4-year target to 51.7%. This target setting approach blended both the consideration of past trends and policy concerns. As I mentioned previously, simply maintaining the percentage of non-SOV share may be difficult in the face of increasing population. And now this graph has been updated to show the data through the 5-year periods ending in 2018, which coincides with the 2-year target. And luckily, I guess maybe something we had to do with it, but the values match. The target matches the 2-year condition. And as I already mentioned, the group agreed to leave the 4-year target in place as it still seemed reasonable. I'm also showing the non-SOV mode, the non-SOV commute shares for both the New Jersey and New York portions of the urbanized area in the blue and green lines on the top and the bottom of the chart, because non-SOV modes are used much more on the New York side than in New Jersey. So trends in each area are important to monitor. Now turning to the second traffic congestion measure, whereas the non-SOV measure is relatively easy to communicate, the same can't be said for PHED. This slide attempts to break down the measure into its parts, explaining peak hour, excessive delay, and per capita. And it's also important to point out these other factors that go into the measure, the fact that it's only calculated on the national highway system, that it's an annual measure, and that it attempts to represent delay experienced by people, not by vehicles. And this slide we have used to help communicate this measure. But also to help communicate the measure on the next few slides, I'll try to walk through an example that we developed that helps to communicate the concepts behind the PHED measure using a typical family of 4, shown here. The mom, Alicia, drives to work and drops her daughter, Dory, off at daycare on the way. The dad, Bill, bikes to a nearby train station. And the older child, Cole, takes the bus to school. So here's a diary of the family's daily trips. Note that only Alicia and Dory's travel contribute to the PHED measurement because they're the only ones who travel during peak periods in a vehicle on the NHS. Bill uses bike and transit modes, and Cole's school bus only uses local roads, so he's not on the NHS. And here's a schematic of Alicia and Dory's travel from their home in North Brunswick to Alicia's work in Princeton and the daycare that's on the way, and a stopwatch that breaks down the various components of the 30-minute commute. So note that only their excessive delay on US 1, which is an NHS route, counts towards the measure. They have some acceptable delay and some travel on non-NHS roads, but only the 5 minutes of the 36-minute drive from home to work count as excessive delay. The box in yellow walks through how to calculate the PHED measure just for this family. The 5 vehicle minutes become 10 person minutes, and then 80 person hours over the course of the year, and then dividing by the population of the family gives a value of 20 person hours per capita. It just so happens that at the time we developed the targets and set up this example, the PHED per capita value for the region was coming in at about 20. So this example also helps illustrate that this seems to be kind of a reasonable value. And taking this example one step further, this slide illustrates the 4-year target that we established, which we set at 22. This represents about a 2% annual increase in PHED the 4-year period. And in this example, it means that Alicia's commute went from 36 to 37 minutes, but their excessive delay only increased by 30 seconds or half a minute. And this part helps to illustrate that even if delay increases on non-NHS roads, only the NHS portion is counted in this measure. So as I mentioned back in 2018, when we initially set the 4-year target for PHED, the tools that we were using were coming up with a value of around 20 person hours per person in 2017. Because of the inconsistencies in the travel time data set before 2017, we really didn't have any trends to examine. But the group, as I mentioned, agreed that it would be acceptable to set a target that represented somewhere around 2% growth in excessive delay per year. So that's where the 4-year target of 22 came from. And remember that 2-year targets are not required for this measure the first time around. But now we do have some data and trends to look at, but it's not completely simple, and it never is. So I want to note that each state is using a different tool to calculate their PHED metric. New Jersey DOT is using the NPM RDS suite developed by University of Maryland's CAD Lab, while NISDOT is using a tool developed by the State University of New York at Albany's Avail Group, and each of these teams have been refining their calculation methods over time. This chart that I'm showing here attempts to show the PHED measure values for 2017, 2018, and 2019 given by both tools using the most recent calculation methods, the red and gray lines, along with some hybrid numbers which come from using the values provided by Avail for the New York roads and from CAT Lab for the New Jersey roads. The updated hybrid line shown in orange takes the latest values from each tool, whereas the HPMS hybrid in blue uses the values that were reported annually in the HPMS submissions by each DOT, and thus using the calculation methods that were in use at the time of each submittal. I'm also showing in green at the top of this graph the mileage of NHS that is included in the travel time data set for each year. This has been declining over these 3 years, but the actual miles of NHS shouldn't really have changed much at all. But hopefully this travel time data set is getting much closer to the true NHS mileage in the region. So importantly, as I mentioned a few times previously, when we set the initial targets back in 2018, the various tools were giving results around 20 in 2017. However, the latest calculation methods, as we're showing on the graph here, puts this at around 24 or slightly higher. And it appears as if the PHED values have been declining. But how much of that decline is due to the reduction of the mileage of NHS being included? We're not really sure. I've also called out 2 other anomalies in the trends where Avail had some issues calculating the PHED for 2018 in their HBMS submission, but that's been corrected, and where CAT Labs is missing some speed limit data for roads in 2019. However, it appears as if for at least for 2019, the values are reasonably close from the different tools, although still not within the 0.1 rounding that's required for this measure. So when the group met earlier this year, we talked about several important uncertainties. Of course, we talked about the impact that the COVID pandemic might have on these measures. An increase in working from home should lead to a decrease in the PHED measure and an increase in the non-SOV measure, both changes in the desired direction. However, a decrease in transit might have the opposite effect if people instead resort to driving alone. However, there's just not enough information to judge the long-term impacts at this point. Some other uncertainties that were mentioned include, for the PHED measure, the whole issue of data, calculation methods, and the correct representation of the NHS. And then for the non-SOV measure, the group discussed that the source that we're using for the measure, the 5-year ACS, will have less than 20% of the samples collected in a post-pandemic environment. So to wrap up, as I mentioned at the outset, the group agreed to not make any adjustments in the 4-year targets. For the non-SOV measure, it looked like we might be on track to meet the target. And for the PHED measure, there were just too many uncertainties to justify any adjustment. And it appears from the trend lines from the various tools that the target might be within reason. The group also agreed on some next steps that I'm showing here, including to use the 1-year ACS to monitor impacts from COVID-19 and to establish a working group to examine additional bus and truck volume data. So here's my contact information, and I'm looking forward to hearing any questions either at the end of the session or later via email. So I guess I'll turn it back to you, Hyuna and Matt.
Great. Thanks, Keith. So this is Matt coming back on. So Thanks to all the presenters. I'm turning my camera back on and I'm bringing up my little notes with my questions and everything. Again, thanks to all the presenters from both FHWA, Nelson and Karen, Brian from RTC, Hopday from Georgia DOT, and then Keith from NJTPA. We now have opportunities for Q&As, question and answer. Again, if you have any questions, please use the GoToWebinar Q&A functionality. That would be the best way to get your questions to me. I'm going to try to start reading some of them right now. So the first one is for, I guess, for Nelson at FHWA. It's a question that came from Alan Ward in New York State. Is there a limit on the size of, it's kind of very specific, is there a limit on this is there a limit on the size of individual text responses that are expected for the PMF responses?
Yeah, thanks, Matt and Alan. For all practical purposes, there isn't a limit. I mean, interestingly enough, the system can take over 1 billion characters. So we're never going to come close to that amount. So yeah, there really is no practical limit. But one thing to note is that there's an attachment tab. There's a couple of required attachments, but there's also an opportunity for the state DOTs to submit additional supportive material. That does have a limit of 50 megabytes per file submitted. But again, state DOTs can submit multiple times. So.
All right, thanks, Nelson. The next one is for Brian. There's a question. Ask the question, how are you relating transit performance data to changes in the PM3 performance forecasts? And do you have any type of model that relates the two measures together?
Yeah, I think what we focus on, I guess there's two parts. When it comes to the transit data, we're collecting information from the software called Swiftly, which allows us to understand the schedule adherence, where the vehicles get behind and things like that. I guess the way I would describe that is we're fusing data from several sources. So the Swiftly data, the signal preemption data, the emergency vehicle preemption data, and then the signal analytics. When that all gets bundled together, we can understand how the signals perform with and without different parameters for transit signal priority. One of the key things for that is you're going to have stakeholders who want to emphasize the traffic signal performance. You're going to have the stakeholders who want to maximize the transit signal performance. We need to find a happy medium. That involves fusing the data from these sources, doing some trial and error, doing some analytics. But I always believe that you can ultimately bundle everything up into a report that shows the temporal and spatial aspects and then what the variable is. So if we can find a balance between transit benefits and signal performance, then I guess that would translate into maximum person throughput. If we can get more people on the bus because the buses are adhering to the schedules better because of what we do with the signals, then we have the potential to maximize throughput, and that can find its way into the target setting.
Great, thanks, Brian. Next one is for Keith. There are a couple for Keith. The first one, your visual on explaining the PHED measure, person hours of excessive delay was good. Did you get any feedback on it from the public? Do you think it was useful? Have you refined it at all? Or how have you used it, like within public involvement or anything?
So thanks for the compliment, by the way. And that example we have shared with our Regional Transportation Advisory Committee members and our board. They seem to appreciate and pretty much understand what we were trying to get at. We also have a brief clip of that example and an explanation on our website, a little video that the public can use to, and we point to that often so that help people understand.
Okay. I guess that's a note for all the audience members. If you want to, if you agree with the way that Keith and they were able to explain that, go to their website and grab it, use it, and beg, borrow, and steal from others. We're all friends here. So as an example, the next one also for Keith was a specific specific on towards the end of your presentation regarding the 5-year ACS American Community Survey data having only a 20% of the samples. A question about, can you explain that a little more? The person missed it or it wasn't clear enough.
Sure. So the data that we're using for non-SOV travel share is the 5-year American Community Survey, and that collects samples over a period of 5 years. So when we come to a 4-year target, we'll be using because of the data is delayed, we'll be using the ACS that ends in 2020, and it starts in 2016. So 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019 will be pre-pandemic, and only part of 2020 will be people reporting on how they travel during the pandemic.
Great, thanks. Another question I think for everyone. I know Keith, you really talked about the COVID-19 impacts and how it's more of an immediate need or an immediate impact. You're not sure what those medium to sort of long-term impacts are going to be. I don't know if any of the other presenters, FHWA, Karen, or Nelson, or anybody else, what is your agency thinking about, either when it comes to specific to the PM3, the CMAQ type measures? How are you considering that? Or maybe just sort of more in general? I know a lot of people, I know from the planning community, it seems like it's starting to sort of talk about this and trying to figure out, how do we start collecting data on this? How do we, make sure that we're looking at this, not, next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to kind of see what those trends are and see if they are, is it a long-term trend? Is it a medium-term trend? Is it really fundamentally changing the way we travel, and how might that affect the performance measure? So I'll just open it up to the group if anybody wants to sort of take that one, or everybody can take that one, take a stab at it. Or no one.
Well, I did discuss a little bit about what we talked about in our urbanized area, and really, the jury is still out on what the new normal might be. Or, people might just go back to the way they traveled before. Things might change drastically. There might be some, middle ground in between, and we just don't know.
Yeah, let me chime in real quickly, because we do weekly comparisons of volumes. Right now, our urban freeways are running at about 20 to 25% lower. Las Vegas obviously is very dependent on events. Pretty much all our conventions are shut down. We don't have any international flights. We do get a ingress and egress of travel from Southern California that's running 15 to 20% lower than what it normally does, but that the flights and the conventions are the things that are hurting us now. When that comes back to normal, I think we will see things return close to where we were. We continue to build and plan for a previous normal. We just have to hope that happens.
Hey, Matt, I can chime in here. This is Hapte from GDOT. So our traffic operations, the TMC, is kind of releasing data how the public is traveling on the Atlanta area interstates. And so in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a significant dip in terms of travel. Obviously, there was a shelter in place announced, so nobody was pretty much traveling. But now, recently those numbers has kind of started, and it's kind of picking up and stabilizing. But I just want to make a general comment. We still have to see what the new normal is going to be. I hear a lot of comments from employers whether they even need, whether they have to reduce their office space, because now they see a lot of folks are working from home, and it's kind of they're doing great. So there is no need for a lot of office space, and so there has been a lot of that kind of discussion. And then when you think about it now, even the National Household Travel Survey now, coming up next in the next generation, we still don't know when the surveys are going to be out. So from the national level, we were told that the trip making, the trip making characteristics of how the public is traveling, it has to come to a certain acceptable level before even the surveys are out. So there is no definite answer for that question, but it's just waiting to see how to see where, what the new normal is going to be.
Excellent, thanks, Haptek. So we're coming up, well, we're at 3:30. There was one more specific question for FHWA. It might be applicable to others. When will the urbanized areas be required to report their metrics, the 200,000 population and maintenance or non-attainment for the upcoming second performance period?
Hi, this is Karen Parrott. So for the next performance period, the baseline reports will be due October 1, 2022. The applicability for that performance period for the CMAQ measures is done as of the data based on October 1, 2021. So areas will have a year to understand that those requirements are expected to apply to them as of the first report due October 1, 2022. And at that point, all of the data is updated. So it's all new non-attainment maintenance status, population sizes, the most recently available data is used at that point. So it's a wholesale update, which is done and published a year in advance of that first report, which is due October 1, 2022.
Great, thanks, Karen. I think that's all the time that we have for questions. Again, if you have more of them, feel free to send them in, or I hope all the presenters wouldn't mind being asked questions sort of offline. They all, I think, provided their contact information, so please feel free to contact them. With that, I will turn it over to Jana, who will close us out for today. And just, thanks for joining us. Look for more of these webinar series and let us know if you have topics. But Jana, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Matt. As we mentioned earlier, this is the final episode in our target setting mini-series. We'll be returning to our regularly scheduled bi-monthly webinars on September 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with a webinar focused on TPM communications. Presentations will cover approaches to communicating about TPM, how communications have been used to support an agency's strategy, experiences in selecting, influencing messages, and determining communication channels. We're still finalizing our lineup for the session, so stay tuned for more details soon in your mailbox or register today at tpm-portal.com. Our November webinar will address system performance management topics. As always, please continue to send us ideas for future webinars you'd like to see as we look forward to 2021. And just one final reminder, for more information, you can always visit the AASHTO TPM portal. That's tpm-portal.com. And thank you to all our presenters today. Bye-bye.